bathing in the monster's blood, the prince became invincible. Wagner's famous opera, Ring of the Nibelung, immortalizes the hero, killed finally through the cunning of the jealous Queen Brunhild, who perished with him. To this day, the Lower Rhine's red wine bears the name Dragon's Blood. This region of the Rhine got its name from another tale of feminine guile and the supernatural. Here, the scenic Rhine curves sharply, and the swift current grows treacherous. Steep rocks jut skyward from the river's edge. Upon these rocks, according to legend, a woman of otherworldly beauty materialized each evening. Her name was Lorelei, and her sweet, plaintive song deafened boatmen to the river's thundering roar. When the men regained their senses, it was too late. They could no longer steer clear of the rocks, nor keep the jealous waves from swamping their boats. And the beautiful Lorelei, over the cries of drowning sailors, she continued her siren chanting until the morning sun chased off the night. Travel down the Rhine River today is a floating lesson in medieval rivalry. At every curve, another castle appears high atop the riverbanks. Each represents a landlord's claim to all the territory below. Two castles in particular illustrate the shifting balance of power that once characterized the mighty river region. The castle Teurenberg on the Rhine's east bank was built by the Archbishop of Trier around 1356. Not to be outdone by a churchman, his neighbors, the wealthy Counts von Katzenelnbogen, erected their own castle on the opposite hill. These powerful merchants were already the proud owners of 138 villages. Although they named their new prize the Burg nor Katzenelnbogen, it came to be known as the Burg Katz, or Cat's Castle. Predictably, the first castle, the Teurenberg, was then nicknamed Burg Maus, Mouse Castle. Thus, the antagonism between merchants of great wealth and the all-powerful Catholic Church resembled a game, a cat-and-mouse rivalry that continued through the ages. When they weren't baiting one another or pressing their vassals into service, the lords of the Rhine passed leisurely days with pleasant diversions. Favorite at the Burg Maus was hunting, using falcons and eagles, a blood sport that originated in the Orient. Survivors of the Crusades and well-traveled merchants like the Katzenelnbogen counts brought falcons and falconers to Europe and the British Isles. There, the sport thrived among the privileged classes. The quarry these eagles are after are pigeons and other small birds. On the winds of the twisting Rhine Valley, they will soar indefinitely before diving after prey or returning to their master's glove. Opposite the cat-and-mouse castles near the village of St. Goar lie the ruins of the once glorious and powerful Rheinfels castle. The Rheinfels was also constructed by the powerful Counts von Katzenelnbogen, who for years used it as their main residence. During an invasion by the French in the late 18th century, peasants with a centuries-old gripe against its owners burned it. A few miles downriver, on the east bank of the Rhine, a high, cone-shaped hill rises above the quiet hamlet of Braubach. The castle crowning the hill has an unusually slender keep, towering above its attendant courts and ramparts. While it is a massive and presumably easy target, this castle alone among the Rhine landmarks has remained unscathed by enemy attacks. This is the Marksburg. stability, the Marksburg's walls are triangular and built so close to the hill's edge that in places it's hard to see where the rocks end and the walls begin. Old foundations reveal that the citadel began as a fortified tower, probably built by the 10th century Franks. The Roman-styled central tower was built about 200 years later. Subsequent owners of the Marksburg erected an additional defensive wall. Unlike other castles, the Marksburg has survived into the 20th century as more than a ruin or a romantic restoration. Despite additions in the 17th and 18th centuries, its medieval character has been magnificently preserved. The landlord who erected the main buildings in the 13th century was called Eberhard von Katzenelnbogen, another count from the family whose vast influence shaped the history of the Middle Rhine. A canny businessman and trader, he shared his prosperity with the city of Braubach. The castle gave the town much-needed employment and, most of all, protection. This vital function of all medieval castles was acknowledged throughout the continent by friend and foe alike. In a statement of détente between church and state, the Archbishop of Cologne wrote, "Our cities show that their life and belongings are linked with the decline of the castle." Count Eberhard's generosity at Marksburg was not purely one-sided. He could order Braubach workers to the castle whenever their services were needed. For Eberhard's court, access to the castle on horseback was a strict necessity. Because of their heavy armor, knights of the era couldn't dismount without help. Without armor, they weren't so encumbered. Marksburg's main entrance was carved out of the slate rock of the mountain itself. Rough-hewn steps prevented horses from slipping during rains. At the end of this stairway lies the Roman Palace, the castle's oldest building. Marksburg's central courtyard is remarkably narrow, crowded by the massive Roman tower at its center. Surrounding the courtyard is the Gothic palace built at the end of the 15th century. The palace's sharp roof is protected with slate, excavated for the castle's foundation. Under the castle's second tower lies the spacious Rittersaal, the Knights' Hall and main living room where official receptions took place. Here Count Eberhard entertained and plotted with the region's noblemen. The hall's massive wall is 10 feet thick, sturdy enough for even the most determined onslaught by catapult or cannon. Adjoining the Knights' Hall, inside the second tower, is a striking polygonal chapel, spanned by groined vaulting in 10 sections. Colorful biblical scenes compete overhead with flattering portraits of knights. The chapel originally was constructed on the east side of the castle. Later it was moved to the castle's south side, its most vulnerable face. God, its builders reasoned, would protect his sanctuary. To help transfer the Holy Spirit to the new chapel site, these ceremonial heads were also moved. They represent the 7 deadly sins, expiated only through prayer. This portrait depicts St. Mark. He played a vital role in the legend that gave the fortress its name. Long ago, Elizabeth, a maiden of the castle, became secretly engaged to a knight called Sigebert. When Sigebert went to war on behalf of his king, Elizabeth waited for him, but in vain. Word came that in a gruesome battle, her beloved had been killed. In her grief, Elizabeth was comforted by a stalwart monk called Marcus. Soon a mysterious knight named Rochus appeared, asking for Elizabeth's hand. Reluctantly, she agreed to be